Welcome back to the Monkey Table. So, my Varang doll received so much love from you guys that it was inevitable I would have to continue the Avatar series. And what better character to do next than Tsireya? A lot of people have been asking me to do her, and I've also wanted to make a doll of Tsireya for a really long time. She's definitely one of my favorite Avatar characters just because of how friendly and bubbly and positive she is. I love the badass woman in the Avatar franchise, but I also really love Tsireya for bringing a bit of a breath of fresh air into the movies, in that she's a bit more softer, but at the same time she is still able to hold her own and throw hands if needed. And I think it's good to have female characters who are super badass but also very feminine and soft at the same time. I love it. Not to mention her design is just chef's kiss. Like, I mean, the hair, the braids, the outfits. Come on, Tsireya is a certified baddie. So I picked Catherine Demue as the base doll because I felt her face matched Tsireya's really well. I switched her hands with Lorna McNessie's because the Metcaina have like a small ridge on their arms, which helps with the swimming. And I figured because Lorna's hands have that ridge as well, it would be easier for me to make the hands that way. And even though Lorna has this little sister body type, her arm length is still pretty much the same as Catherine's, so the swap was really easy. But more of that later. In the meantime, I cut her hair and yank off her head so I can remove all the old hair, so I can soak the head in acetone to shrink it later and then reroot. Also, fun fact, it took me about 3 years to finish this doll. Like, I got the base body in 23 and I was prepping materials since then. I actually started working on her in 2025, but it was until 2026 when I actually finished it, because procrastination is no joke. I guess I was really intimidated by not making her realistic enough, especially the outfit. Cause like, it's super complex and detailed, and for a very long time I was not sure how to approach it at all. And I really wasn't confident enough in my skills to try and attempt approaching it in the first place. Starting Varang was really the tipping point because I understood that not only am I capable of doing it, but it's not as complex as I thought it would be. And after I finished my Varang doll, I kind of said to myself, well, actually, I can try Tsireya. And what do you know, but it actually worked. And now here I am putting the head in the acetone soup. Yum yum. Actually, no, don't drink. This is done to shrink the head because I feel that Monster High bodies are not really proportional with their heads, and I want the doll to be as realistic and as movie accurate as possible. And that's why I decided to shrink the head so it would look more proportionate to the body, and also cut off the extra finger on her hands and the nails as well, because Tsireya doesn't really have long nails. And also cut the tail a bit because the Metcaina tail is a bit different to the Omaticaya tail. And yeah, I also cut the fins on the hands, which actually, looking back now, probably didn't make any sense. And instead of replacing the hands with Lorna's hands, I probably should have just applied clay onto the arms directly and made the fins, as opposed to changing the arms. Anyway, it's too late now, live and learn. Next doll, I will just use the clay. And as you can see, the head has shrunk, so I need to edit the peg and also the head opening a little bit so it fits on the body. And this is what the mutilated body looks like now, so perfect to start customizing with the clay. You guys probably know that the Omatica and the Metcaina have different body types, adapt to their biosphere, and I really wanted to show that. The larger chest cavities of the Metcaina are one of the biggest differences, because the Metcaina swim, so they need to hold their breath for a really long time, and they need bigger lung capacity. So subsequently their chest cavities are bigger, so they can fit the bigger lungs in there. And so I decided to change the chest of the doll to make it a bit more bigger and rounder, to kind of showcase that bigger chest cavity. And just to kind of reflect the swimmer's build of the Metcaina, I suppose. And this is actually what I really like about Avatar, is that they didn't shy away from giving the Na'vi different physiques and giving the Metcaina like proper swimmer builds, including the women, especially the women. I feel like in our society we have very rigid beauty standards, especially when it comes to women and women in cinema. You mostly always see, thin, fragile, like small shoulders, skinny waist, etc. And as somebody who has been swimming since I was very young, I always kind of felt a bit insecure about my broad shoulders and pretty long arms and big hands. Like, I remember my family always mocking my long monkish arms, as they called them, and trying on a summer dress one time, and my grandma saying, "Damn, you got some broad shoulders there." It kind of stuck with me for years and was really a source of insecurity for me. So, you know, seeing characters like Tsireya and the Metcaine on screen with their broad shoulders and large chest cavities and their long arms and their big hands and feet, it really made me kind of feel seen, because seeing a character with your body features, I guess, and not having these features emphasized as something negative, but focusing more on portraying the character in a positive light, it really made me feel more comfortable about myself. And it makes sense, because when you see a character you like sharing something along which you like, your body type, or I don't know, the same eye color or the same interests, it really makes you feel seen. It makes you appreciate those aspects of you which maybe you have not appreciated before. And this, of course, is one of the reasons why I really like Tsireya as a character, because, you know, we have the same long arms and big hands and stuff, but it's not something that really defines us necessarily. Not to mention, after watching the film, I kind of realized that these features that I have are not necessarily a bad thing. Like, having long arms and broad shoulders is not bad, especially when it comes to swimming. Like, how are you mocking me for some physiological differences, which means I will just smoke you in the water? Like, you should be crying because I will beat you in a swimming competition. Come on. These aren't flaws. These are advantages which will help me swim better than you. And you're just hating ass bitch because, you know, if you're in the water, you're gonna go down. Anyway, I don't really know if I explained this well enough, but that's just my opinion. And guys, don't let anybody mock you for any of your features or tell you that something is bad. Many disadvantages are actually advantages in disguise. And in most cases, more often, people are just haters who are brainwashed by societal standards, so that's their problem. Anyway, sorry, back to the doll. So you can see that I use clay to make her leg fins and also her arm fins. For the arm fins, I stuck the clay around the sculpted arm fins on the hands, but I think after especially sculpting the fins on her legs with just the clay, that it wasn't really necessary to use arms with a fin sculpt, as I mentioned before. So I think in the future I will just take the doll with her normal arms, carefully stick the clay onto it in a very thin layer, and then just using my fingers pinch it out to make that kind of fin shape. You can see also, to allow her arm to move separately from her hand, I did not make the fin all the way across her arm. Rather, there's a slight separation between the fin on her arm and on her hand, just to make movement more possible. And of course I modified the tail a bit as well, and also her face, and I also made her nose just a bit wider, and also gave her the broad shoulders, of course. Now for the tail, I fully coated it with clay and also kind of fused it to the body with the clay so it wouldn't be able to move at all. But later I kind of realized that I didn't like the limited movement, and also the tail started cracking. So later on I removed the clay at the top of the tail, disconnected it from the body, and did a small thinner layer of clay so that I could remove the tail when I wanted to, and it would just make putting on her outfits a bit easier. I wasn't really sure how to sand the body down. I knew I had to do it to make the clay blend better with the body, but I have not sanded dolls before, so I really wasn't sure how to do it, and I kind of didn't do it properly, I guess. And some bitch was actually shitting herself in my comments on part 1 of my Tsireya video, talking about, "Oh my god, your sanding was so shit, nobody's gonna buy your stupid doll." I mean, I guess, but how empty is your life that you shit yourself over a piece of plastic? Anyway, she gave me a good laugh, that's for sure. In the meantime, guys, if there's any advice you have for how to improve my sanding, like any tools I can use or anything, feel free to let me know. I'm always open to learning, and I'm gonna be improving this area anyways, so any constructive criticism is more than welcome, provided it's polite so I don't need to curse you out. Thank you! Now, to change her skin color, I airbrushed the doll with some paints, because that's the most easiest way for me to change the skin tone. And it's worked for me, so, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. The one downside I find with airbrushing is that inevitably the paint will scrape or flake off, especially if you're rough with the doll. And I haven't really found a way around it yet, but if anybody knows, feel free to let me know. And once I finish airbrushing, I just lightly dabbed some pastel here and there, just to kind of add some shadows. And once that was done, I moved on to my favorite part of painting on the stripes. Now, the key thing is the Omaticaya and the Metcaina have different stripe patterns. While the Omaticaya stripes are more straight, I guess, and rounded, the Metcaina have more wavy stripes on their skin that looks a bit like water or sunlight when it's reflected on water. And it kind of makes sense because, you know, their skin adapted to their biosphere, so logically it would look like that. And that's all fine, but for the longest time I really couldn't figure out how to draw these stripes properly, and it took me quite a while before I finally got the hang of it. Also, just a heads up, the stripe patterns on the arms and the outside of the leg are a bit different to the patterns on the inside of the leg and the chest, so like they're more like lines, whereas the ones on the inside kind of divulge more into like a spotted cheetah-like pattern. So if you're going to be doing a repaint or a doll of Tsireya, just take into account these little differences. And now that the body is done, let's move on to her accessories and outfit. So I started with her cute little knife, and essentially I made it from clay because that's the only material I really know how to work with. In the visual dictionary it says the knife is made out of sea glass, and yeah, you can see from the texture it's like glass-like, but I wasn't really sure how to recreate this texture in real life and what materials to use. So I used the clay and used acrylic paints to imitate the sea glass effect. I wonder if a 3D printer could be used to have this sea glass effect, but I don't have a 3D printer and I don't know how to use one, so it was clay this time. And now that the cute little knife is done, I need to add the accessories and make the hilt. So for that I use this special paper thingy and just basically cut strips of it before carefully wrapping them around the hilt. And I used some blue acrylic paints to paint over the hilt a little bit, over this special paper thingy, just to give it a bit more depth. Honestly, I don't really think the paint was necessary, but I just wanted to add it for the pizzazz, so I did it. Now you can see on the hilt of the knife there's also like some little strings with a few beads on them, and to recreate that I took essentially a piece of twine and unraveled the piece to get more thinner fibers, like thinner strings, and then just carefully glued them onto the hilt. I also added a few see-through beads to the twine and carefully secured them with glue just so it looked exactly like the knife. And to make the texture part of the hilt, I basically just took this little party bag I found in an arts and crafts shop, cut a piece off, and then glued it carefully onto the hilt. Now I add some more twine really carefully to recreate this rope part that you see curling around the hilt and secure it with glue. And once that's done, I just paint over with brown paint to make sure the hilt kind of blends a bit with the knife and that it looks like the actual knife from the movie. To make the hilt pouch, I got these little patches from an art shop. In fairness, looking back now, the texture was a bit too thick, but at the time I thought it worked, so I basically just cut out a strip, applied some glue, and then carefully folded it over to make a knife pouch. And the fabric was so thick, I actually had to wrap it around this little pen knife thing I have so it would stick. It turned out okay in the end, but overall I think the knife was a little bit too big for scale, and next time I'm making a doll of Tsireya or any avatar character, I'll make the knife a bit smaller. Now I also decided to give Tsireya some pants just because it would look a bit better and because I didn't want her to be like Varang bare booty freak, yeah. I chose some purple fabric because I figured it would look well along with her other outfits, and just cut a small piece out before carefully gluing some more rope twine thingy onto it and then folding it over just so it would stick better. And then I also glued the edges shut. I didn't stitch the pants because I was honestly too lazy and I didn't want to waste time on stitching something this small. But in the future, I am going to try stitching as well, just to see if it looks better and if it holds better as well. And I left some twine hanging out on the back to make it easier to tie it around the tail and to use that twine to put the knife on too. But honestly, I quickly realized it didn't really look good and it didn't really stay, so I changed the tail and also the knife pouch. I made it smaller and I glued it onto some twine I tied around the tail. And it looked much better this way in my opinion, and I think in the future I am going to follow the same procedure for other Navi dolls, but just make the knife a little bit smaller, more to scale. Now let's move on to her outfit. And I'm going to start with this one because that's the one she's known most for, and it's also one of my favorites. So let's go and start the skirt. It should be easy to make, right? Wait. Bruh. Now, how the fuck? Alright, so I put on my thinking cap and used the old brain me a little bit, and I thought, okay, this fabric looks most like the texture of the skirt. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm going to cut out a big piece of it, then take this ribbon with different textures and use some of them to make the belt. Onto which I place the big piece of fabric and then add these little whole pieces to kind of make the base and the texture parts of the skirt. Then I'm going to take the different ribbons and twines with different textures I have and carefully glue them on to make the tendrils of the skirt. On the back of the skirt, I add a light piece of fabric just to make it look a bit smoother and to ensure it doesn't really chafe off the doll's body. And I also use some thin strings to kind of make the raised texture part of the skirt. I don't know how to describe it, but if you look at the picture, it makes more sense. Now to make the loopies on her skirt, like the little circle thingies, I just take pieces of twine and string and ribbon of different textures, because if you look at the loopies, you can see they're kind of different texture, each one of them. And I carefully curved them into a circle and glued them together and then just cut them off like so. Then I arrange them where I want them to be on the skirt, so I know where to put them for the future, and I start painting the skirt with acrylic paints. And I make sure to paint the skirt with different colors, like a deep green, some yellows here and there, a bit of whites, because if you look at the skirt in the picture, it's not a uniform green color. There are different shades there, different textures, different gradients, so I also make sure to add them just to make it look a bit more realistic and a bit deeper. I also paint the loopies because if you look at them, most of them are different colors, and then carefully glue them onto the skirt. And I also make sure to add little accessories she has on her skirt, like the beads and the little calcified thingy, and paint them with white paint. And I make them with clay. And I also use clay to make tiny little circles, which I carefully glued onto the loopies to recreate the little beads that she has on her loopies on her skirt. And I carefully colored them in their respective colors. And that was the skirt done. Later on, I have to admit, I did change the tendrils of the skirt a little bit because I was not happy with the thickness and how they looked, and to do that I just took some twine, unraveled it and painted the pieces and stuck them on carefully onto the skirt. Unfortunately, I didn't film the process because I had no more storage and because I'm a basic ass bitch, but guys, like, if you need it, I can make a short on it or something, just let me know. Sorry. Now let's start with her top. I begin by making the central part of the top. I think it's meant to be like a carving of an emu, but it looks really cool anyway. And use clay to basically make it. And I use my crafting knife to carefully cut the edges and a small needle to cut the little holes in it. Once it's dried, I just paint it with a very nice white, and then later I add the different shades of yellow and a bit of orange and red just to make it a bit pop and make it deeper. The bra part, I just took some of the solid pieces from the fabric I used for the skirt and glued the centerpiece to them both. And for the neck piece part, I just cut off some more of the fabric, glued it onto the center piece, and then carefully adjusted it to match her neck. And I secured it in the back really carefully with some Velcro hook and loop fasteners. Now, to make all the dangly things on her top, what I basically did was take twine again, unravel it, then take the thinner strings and carefully tie them very firmly together in a twisting manner to get the thinner texture I wanted, and then I just glued them onto the top. And to make all the loopy bits, I again took the twisted twine, glued it on, and then carefully twisted it with my fingers, as you can see here, to get that pattern. And here's the top done. Took a lot longer than I expected, but it looks really good, I think. And as I mentioned before, in the neck I fastened it with a Velcro hook and loop thingy, and also in the back I just used the strings to tie it together, and it looks good, I think. And now I carefully start painting the top with acrylic paint, and if you notice, the top is different colors in different places, of course, because it's one of the most complex things that has to exist. But anyway, I made sure anyway to follow the source material to a T and painted different colors in the different places to make it more realistic and accurate. I used different colors in different places. For some areas I made it a bit lighter, for some areas I made it a bit darker. I tried to follow the picture as much as I could, and in some places I kind of added some of my own stuff, I guess. One piece of advice I would give when making her top is to not make it too dark blue, because that's what I did at first and I didn't really like, and I didn't really think it looked like Tsireya's top. Instead, what really helped was using a bit of a lighter aquamarine azure blue, and it made it just look a bit better. Now, to make all these little blue curved stringy thingies, I essentially took like some nice blue thread I had lying around my sewing basket. Please don't ask me where I got it. It's from my grandma's stash, so I don't even know where she got it from. Then carefully glued it to the bra, and using my fingers and my artist knife, I just carefully pressed it down and curved it and glued it on this way until I got the pattern that I wanted. I'm not really sure how to explain it better, but you can see from the video the process I followed, so I hope this helps. I also made sure to add a little clasp she has on her chest piece using clay, and also used the clay as well to make the little, I think they're bits of shell that are on her chest piece. But anyway, I just put them on like so. Also, quick disclaimer, I am not sponsored by Arend, I wish. It's just a box of mints I got from them at a career fair. The mints are pretty good too. And after I'm done with all the little dangly bits and the accessories, I add the little drops she has on the top by using glue. I use a tube of glue with an airbrush nozzle on top to get the more precise, smaller drops of glue, but I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't really happy with the glue drops themselves, and in all honesty, the best way to make these drops is again by using clay and making small balls and just sticking them on with glue and then painting them like so. But still, in the end, I'm really happy with how the top turned out. Now, to make her hair accessory, because it's actually a hair accessory, it's of Owen seagrass, not braids, as myself and many people thought, I took a piece of bendy wire and coated it with glue and then just wrapped some black thread around it really carefully. Then I took this fake pearl accessory I got in an art shop, cut the pearls off, glued some blue ribbon to the wire, and then attached the pearl to it. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it looks good. And the best thing is that because of the wire, it's adjustable, so I can easily attach it to her head, and I don't need to make permanent braids there, so I can change the headpiece whenever I want for her different costumes. I know some of you are curious, so these are the pearl beads I use for her headpiece, but to be honest, I found these ones in the same shop, and I feel like they might work even better because the beads are smaller, so I will try these in the future. To make her green bracelet, I essentially took this ribbon I had and then tied some string really carefully in circles around it using my knife and my hands. Then I painted it with acrylics, and I used small balls of clay, stuck them onto the bracelet to make the beads, and colored them in as well. To make the brown bracelet, I took 2 pieces of twine and tied them together like this, before taking an abalone shell pendant which I had and then using some pliers to crush pieces of it. And I carefully glued those crushed pieces onto the bracelet to imitate the small abalone beads, shards she has in the bracelet in the movie. Honestly, I'm not really happy with how the bracelet looks. It does not look like what I wanted it to or like her bracelet, so I am going to redo it in the future. But for now, it can stay like this. Now, because all of Tsireya's fits are low-key fire, and also because I hate myself, obviously I had to do all of her costumes. So let's now start with the one we see her first in. Obviously, I wouldn't have had the skill nor the material to make a proper abalone, I don't know how to pronounce it, shell for her chest piece. So I just took some clay and molded it into the chest piece that we see on her. And unfortunately, I did it wrong several times, so I had to redo it completely. When you're making the chest piece, don't forget to include a small hole for the strap to go through and also the little holes on the bottom. Now for the band, I used this material because it looked most like the one in the movie, and I carefully glued it to the main chest piece. And I had to cut the string in half because I was making several outfits for her and I would need to change them every so often. You can see here I carefully painted the chest piece to make sure it imitated the abalone shell as best as I could. Now, if you look at this particular chest piece, you will see that there are lots of little strings attached to like the main string. So I made sure to also attach them really carefully onto the main chest piece. And you can see here how I was doing it. The main stringy part, I guess is what you can call it, of the chest piece was a bit complex for me at the beginning. But after looking for like 5 hours, I realized that I could just glue it really carefully. Like glue the strings carefully on the right part of the shell and then glue lots of little strings hang down to imitate the look. Also, if you're wondering why I'm saying chest piece all the time, it's because I don't like the word bra. It's weird and it's icky. I don't like it. I'm not gonna say it. I'm gonna use chest piece. Leave me alone. Although I could probably just use the word top, actually, now that I think about it. Right, anyway, so to make her green skirt, I took some twine, cut out lots of pieces, and then colored them into the green aquamarine colors that are there. And you can see that on the bottom of the skirt, some of the tendrils are a bit unraveled, so I also unraveled the twine a little bit just to recreate that effect. Now, on the top of her skirt, you can see there is some material that looks a bit like bast fiber or yarn jute. So I took yarn jute and just unraveled it a bit and then colored it into the colors that were on the skirt. And you can also see that below the light yellow-green bast fiber, there's like some more darker green one. And so I just took this fabric I had, colored it into that green, and just left it to dry. Now, her belt was the most complex part for me because I honestly did not know how to recreate it, and I honestly didn't just have the energy. So I just took this ribbon that I had, cut out some pieces from it, glued some pieces on, and just called it a day. Call me lazy if you will, but I worked a lot on the other costumes and I didn't really care that much about this one to put that much effort into, I'll be honest. And it doesn't help that, to be honest, this is my least favorite of Tsireya's costumes, so I honestly was not that excited about making as I was, let's say, for the others. Speaking of which, let's move on to outfit number 3, aka my second favorite. I absolutely adore this top, and to make it I essentially used the same fabric as for the other top and took the more smoother string, painted it yellow and carefully secured it around her to make sure it fitted. I added smaller pieces of twine, which I painted brown to the sides and adjusted their length, before starting on the little leaves on the top, which I made from this epoxy clay. Just a quick tip for anybody making this top, as you can see the leaves at the front are slightly bigger than the ones on the bottom. So on the ends of the top, the string, the leaves should be like pretty small. Once I have my leaves sorted, I just paint them in a very light blue with some greens to mimic that abalone texture and color. And when that's done, I carefully start to glue them onto the top itself using those small brown pieces of twine to glue them on. And I also make sure to tie more thin pieces of brown twine around the whole body of the top, like around the string, because if you look at the top itself in the pictures, you will see that there is something like this tied around the top. Now to make the skirt, I take the same fabric I used for the first skirt, cut off some long pieces and also some solid pieces and glue them onto a piece of fabric like so. And I also carefully glued some string at the top in a very curly pattern just to mimic the skirt's pattern before coloring it in the same colors. I glued some string on top to match the raised pieces of the skirt before coloring the rest in. To make the shell headpiece, I used a Monster High doll head as the base and lightly stuck some clay onto it, which I then carefully molded into a shell shape using my crafts knife, like so. Also, as a general tip, I would say that the visual dictionary and just screenshots from the film are really good to recreate the outfits. The Veta Workshop also posted some images of the outfits to their Instagram, and they're quite good, but some of them are not entirely the same as the final pieces, so just be aware. Most noticeably, these pieces are different to the ones in the film. There are minor differences, but they're still there. Obviously something had to go wrong, so I had to fix the shell a bit, but that's fine. In the end I managed to paint it white, and then to make the headpiece itself I used the same wire and string method as I did for the first headpiece, and then glued the shell carefully on like so. Now let's move on to the final outfit before I die. So you can see the top seems to be secured to some kind of like branch thing, and I made it using epoxy clay. I had to make it twice because the first one broke, of course, but that's fine. And after doing so, I also made the little shells that she has on the top from the same epoxy clay as I did for the branch, and carefully colored them in like so to mimic the abalone texture and colors. I noticed that carefully applying the paint and then gently smearing it a bit with your finger really helps with giving the same texture look, so try it out. I think it looks good. And to make the strings for the top, I used the same material that I used for the second outfit, so it came in really handy and the texture was really perfect in my eyes. I carefully glued them on and then adjusted them to match the color and pattern, but to be honest, I feel like they turn out a bit too thick, so in the future I'm going to use a thinner string, and I'm definitely going to have to revisit this top. Not 100% happy with it, but that's for another time. Also, you can see that on the strings of the top she has something like little beads, and I recreated them by essentially applying epoxy clay and coloring it green. To make the skirt, I just took some twine, cut it into long pieces, and then glued them together to make it into the skirt. There are some blue bead-like type things on the belt, and I couldn't really find the perfect beads, so I just made the beads on the skirt in my version from epoxy clay. I did, however, manage to find blue beads for the tendrils of the skirt, which I applied really carefully like this. To make her flower hair accessory, I took this already made paper flower, cut it a bit to make it look like the one in the film, then painted it and inserted a wire inside. I twisted the wire and also covered it with some thread so I could carefully put it into her hair and it could stay there without being too noticeable. And for the green threads inside the flower, I just cut off some sewing thread and carefully glued it inside. And just to make the abalone pieces pop a little bit, I used this pigment which I just diluted with a bit of water and then painted on top of the pieces, and I think it turned out really well. And obviously I had to make her a custom doll stand because no ordinary doll stand could do, and I'm just extra as fuck. So I basically got this cheap ass resin necklace making forms molds and just put epoxy in them, and then took a Monster High doll stand and carefully inserted it into the clay. I used the clay modeling tool to carefully move the epoxy around to give it like a sand-like texture. I left the clay to dry overnight to give this very nice looking stand, which I then painted with this garish urine yellow color. And I thought that was super amazing before I realized that, oh, actually the stand wasn't tall enough for the doll, so I had to do the whole thing over again. Second time around, I painted the sand in a more light color to reflect the light sand of the Mediterranean beaches. and I used resin to create the water. It was my second time using resin and I completely forgot that it's toxic and you need to wear gloves while handling it. So guys, please don't be like me and wear gloves if you're working with resin. Like, it got stuck to my hand and I had to wash
settled
it off
on
two blue shades which I couldn't decide between, so I kind of did a sample of both, and I really liked this blue, but unfortunately it didn't really blend well with the resin, so I had to go with the lighter blue color. But to be honest, I actually ended up liking it more than the darker blue, so I guess it all worked out. And here is what the mold looked like after 24 hours of curing the resin. You know, you see it popped out really easily from the mold, and I carefully removed the extra pieces and colored the base just to make it blend a bit more seamlessly. And I then carefully painted on the white to make the impression of waves. I saw a lot of online hacks on how to make waves in a resin coaster, but unfortunately all my attempts didn't work out, as you can see. So I decided to just paint the waves on because, you know, as artists, I feel like a lot of times we are hard on ourselves to be perfect in everything we do, but sometimes it doesn't work out and you don't need to push yourself to the limit. You know, you can just do it in a more simpler but equally effective way. And then once you have the skill set to do it better, then you do it better. And in this case, I knew it was better that I left it as it was and painted on the waves, as opposed to if I pushed myself to make the waves as I saw online and ruined the whole piece completely. And I ended up being really happy with the way it worked out in the end. So now I started working on the hair. First of all, I did the braid just to get it out the way and for it to be easier to stick on the rest of the hair if I had the braid already done. I'm actually really crap at making braids, so it took quite some time, but I'm really happy how it turned out in the end. And to make her braids in the front, I just took some yarn and cut off pieces and basically just glued them carefully to the head. I only glued part of the yarn thread and the rest I left free hanging. Once that was done, I just added some more hair to the rest of her head and slowly covered it up in layers. I think she looks amazing this way, but let's make her movie hairstyle. So I take the yarn threads, which I did not glue to the head, and carefully untangle them this way, so they can be part of her hair as well and just kind of blend flawlessly with the rest of her hair. And now we're on to the repaint, finally! So I start with carefully building up thin layers of paint using very finely diluted acrylic paint that I basically just dilute with water. One important thing I've learned from repainters online and doll customizers is that when you are painting the face and painting on features, you need to start really slow with very finely diluted paint. Apply a thin layer, wait until it dries properly, and then apply another layer, and you just build the layers on and on until slowly but surely you get the result. You can't really apply a thick layer straight away as much as you might want to, because unfortunately it's gonna dry and look very clumpy and it's gonna crumble and just scratch really easily. I would know because that's how I used to apply paint when I first was starting out. I would just apply a thick layer of undiluted paint because I was super impatient, and it would dry really badly and I would have to redo everything again, scrape it off with acetone, and it got really annoying really fast. So even though the slow build-up method of layers is quite tedious and boring maybe, it gives the best results. So if you are repainting, this is the way to go, guys. And finally, she is done. 3 years later, I give you the finished Tsireya doll. This right here is years of work, but by God, it's worth it. And I say this is an atheist, lol. Definitely this is the most complex doll I worked on yet, but she's absolutely worth it. I love the details, I love her face, her outfit, I love her hair, just everything about her I love. Thank you guys again for so much support you show me and your love. I mean, it really motivates me to keep creating, and I'm super grateful that you guys really appreciate my work and my dolls. If you want to support me, feel free to check out my coffee. I don't have a Patreon because I don't really know how it works and how it would work for a doll artist, but I might set one up in the future, and I'll let you guys know for sure if I do. Unfortunately, doll making is a very expensive hobby, and the past few months have been a bit tough for me health-wise, so you know, any support really helps at this time. So if you want to slide your girl some hard-earned cash, feel free to do so, but no pressure, only if you can and if you want to. I've also received quite a few beautiful messages from people who have been inspired by my work and have started making their own custom dolls, and I absolutely love reading them. And I really hope this video helps those of you who are making a Tsireya custom, especially if you guys have any questions, like maybe I didn't explain something clearly or some areas are still uncertain, or you just want to know the names of the materials I've used, feel free to give me a shout in the YouTube comments or hit me up on Instagram. You know, I'm always here to answer any questions you have, and it's no issue at all for me. While we're on this topic, guys, if any of you have any advice to give me or anything I can improve in my work, also feel free to let me know, because I am always open for constructive criticism and I would be more than happy to take any advice you guys have. In the meantime, please enjoy this fashion exposition of all of the Tsireya outfits I made, because I'm just extra like that. Also, let me know which outfit you like the best in the comments. I'm really excited to hear about your opinions, guys, and which one you like best. For me personally, her OG outfit is the clear winner. I just love how detailed it is, even though it caused me big headaches trying to make it, but I still love it. My least favorite one was the one with the flower, because I don't like how the top turned out, and I'm gonna have to redo it because I'm not happy with it 100%. But yeah, the rest I really like. So yeah, here's my Tsireya doll, I guess. 3 years of work, 1 week of editing. Hope you guys liked it. And until next repaint. Speaking of which, guess who the next avatar character I'm doing is? Until next repaint.